Gary, good morning. How are you, my man?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, you were adopted. How old are you, by the way, Gary?
51.
All right. So, you were adopted. You decided for some reason to search out your biological father.
Right. My mother found me 12 years ago. She tracked me down when I was 39, much younger, and that reunion was so fulfilling for me. I just felt if I could meet the man who gave me life, then I would be complete, right? I would have my entire identity, and I could make sure that reunion was as happy as the one with my mother.
And what did she tell you about your father?
When I asked her, she said, honey, it's been a long time, and I was young. I was a teenager. He was twice my age. But I remember we had you, and when you were about 3 months old, he took you from New Orleans to Baton Rouge by train. And I think he turned you into the authorities at a church. And when he came home without you, I left him immediately. He turned me into the authorities. I turned him into the authorities. And the next thing I know is my mother's telling me I have to sign relinquishment papers so you can be adopted.
So your father just took you and basically abandoned you.
Yeah, I eventually found that out after years of looking for the truth. He didn't turn me into a church. He abandoned me and said his reasonings were he got tired of hearing it cry. And could no longer run with my mother. So yeah, he left me in an apartment building.
And he just it was just a random apartment building. He didn't know anyone there or whatever. And in fact, there's a newspaper photo of you as a baby boy that because that makes news at the time. Like, hey, look, there's an abandoned baby that we found.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me too. Being turned into the authorities at a church and being found abandoned is totally opposite end of the spectrum for me. But so I made the news, and I wasn't 3 months old like my mother indicated. I was only 4 weeks old.
Wow. Your mother was 14 years old. Your father was about 27 or 28 or something at the time. So he was, that's sort of creepy in itself. That here's a 27-year-old guy doing a 14-year-old girl, right?
That's exactly what my mother eventually said. When I decided to search for my biological father, she immediately went to two of her friends in the San Francisco Police Department. Didn't seem odd to me because her next husband was a homicide inspector in the San Francisco Police Department. So what better place to find a missing person, right? Well, she knew that he had a criminal record, and when that officer came back and said, Judy, there are things in Gary's father's file that we will not share with you. And she tried to temper me by stating, well, honey, that's not to be surprised because, after all, he was with a 14-year-old girl, right? So something wasn't right. But that didn't hinder my search. I said, I have enough information, name, date of birth, social security number, and I went off on a journey that would lead me down this dark path and to the revelation I have today.
Your father's name was Earl Van Best Jr.
Right.
Quickly, for people who are not familiar with the Zodiac Killings, just give us a broad overview of when they happened, where they happened, how they happened, and just a little bit about these killings.
The Zodiac Killer case occurred back in the late 1960s and 1970s, and into the 70s mostly because the Zodiac taunted the authorities, the police as well as the media, that you'll never catch me. I'm too clever for you. And until now, it has remained America's most notorious unsolved serial killer case in history.
How would he kill the people? This was in the, if I remember correctly, in the San Francisco area, right?
Right, San Francisco, East Bay area, and then there's a case down in Riverside. Stabbings and gunshot wounds.
And how many people did the Zodiac Killer kill?
There are five known victims, although he claimed many more. to the press. He bragged about many more.
And he started sending letters. If anyone's seen the movie Zodiac, that deals with this case, but he started sending coded letters to the police, essentially?
Yeah, my father's father was a military intelligence officer in the Navy in World War II, and codes were quite familiar to him. And so once the Zodiac Killer established his confidence, he sent encrypted codes to the Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, and San Francisco Examiner. And the first one, the 408 Cipher, sent in 3 different parts, and he did encrypt a message in those ciphers, and it basically explained why he was doing this. I love killing man because it's more fun than killing animals. After all, man is the most dangerous animal of all. Well, once some high school teachers cracked that cipher and got the hidden message, he insisted back to the newspapers that if you crack this code, you will have my identity. So I don't know if authorities ever looked further in that decoded cryptogram, but my father's name is all over it.
What do you mean by that? Your father's name is all over it?
My father signed his name E.V. Best Jr. And in particular in the 408 a cipher that was mailed to the San Francisco Examiner. I just looked at it one day to see if I could see anything, and out off the page popped E.V. Best Jr. all together in a row, backward, forward, and up. And after the police did not pick that up, he later came back and sent the infamous 340 cipher, which the amateur sleuths in the Zodiac community around the world say is still unsolved. But he insisted when he sent that cipher that his identity was in that cipher. And my father's name, complete name, is in that cipher. He wrote another letter after he realized no one was going to crack his cipher and identify his name. He wrote another letter. He said, by the way, have you cracked my latest cipher? My name is, and he left a blank, and then he put 13 symbols below that my name is. Mm-hmm. And cipher sleuths to this day think that there's some sophisticated meaning to each of those symbols. Those 13 letters are EARL VANBESTJR. And the cipher solution he was hinting at in the 340 spelled his name out completely. Earl Van Best Jr., Junior.
Why do you think if you're killing people, why would you want to alert people to your name?
I think he knew he had them. He had sent the community off on a mission to solve these hidden messages. When after the first 408s, there were no hidden messages. It was all about his identity, and it was him showing I can get away with this because I'm smarter than you.
All right, so I have a lot of questions for you. Gary Stewart has written a book. It's called The Most Dangerous Animal of All, Searching for My Father and Finding the Zodiac Killer. He was adopted, searching for his biological father. And he came to the conclusion after doing this research that he believes that his father is the Zodiac Killer. Now, there have been other people that they suspect was the Zodiac Killer. I think Arthur Lee Allen or something.
Correct.
Why do you think it wasn't him, or is there anything that points away from that guy?
Well, interestingly enough, when I first suspected that my father was a Zodiac Killer, I did everything I possibly could do to disprove my theory, including reading Robert Graysmith's books, Zodiac, which he eventually, Zodiac Unmasked, the second book, he named Arthur Lee Allen as his prime suspect. Arthur Lee Allen insisted over the years that I am not the Zodiac, and he made a comment that, but I know who the Zodiac is. He's a crazy man I met in a Atascadero State Hospital. So when I eventually got to the point to where I went to the head of homicide of the San Francisco Police Department, and I knew really nothing at this point but the information I'd learned online and through Gray Smith's books. I told the lieutenant who was the head of homicide, I said, I don't know everything right now, but I bet when you look up my father's file, the one thing you will find is that he was confined in the Atascadero State Hospital. And I was right.
Now, why? I would think if now you've written this book, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but if this evidence points to your father, Earl Van Best Jr., why wouldn't the authorities, or have they followed up on it? Why wouldn't they go, yeah, that looks like this could be the guy?
You know, Lieutenant John Hennessy, who was the head of homicide at the time, he did follow up, and the information I gave to him had him convinced enough to where, against all odds and against all rules, because the case was deemed closed at the time, he actually took my DNA. He swabbed me to compare my DNA profile to the profile that the SFPD had on file that they thought was a partial profile of the Zodiac Killer. He believed me. The issue was I got no cooperation from the other guys in the San Francisco Police Department who had worked with my mother to help me find him in the first place. Mm-hmm. One was in Internal Affairs, and the other was the former chief of police, Earl Sanders, who was on not active anymore. He was retiring. And when I went to my mother for help, she indicated what was that they told her what was in Gary's father's file is so heinous that it would destroy you and make what he did to you and Gary seem inconsequential. I eventually found out my father was deceased, and I told these guys, I don't care what he did. I mean, I need to know. Whatever heinous, I just need to know. And they told my mother, just please have Gary drop this.
And what was in this file that was so heinous?
I have no idea. To this day, when Lieutenant Hennessy, when I told him about the file, he said, you know, Gare, I'm really upset with Butler because he worked for me for 20-some-odd years, and he wouldn't even let me look at that file. It was still on his desk. So he ran his own computer file, right? Butler had the old manual typewritten file with all the information in there, and the only file Hennessy could get his hands on was a computer-generated file which listed charges, indictments, and disposition of the courts, right? Mm-hmm. Convictions and how much time spent. Mm-hmm. The heinous information, I mean, if you think about heinous, if it's more heinous than raping a 14-year-old and abusing your 4-week-old child, and by the way, I've since found out that my father's first wife was granted a divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty and inhuman treatment. If it's more heinous than that, if he were caught and indicted and convicted, it would be in the electronic record, but it wasn't. So it was something that he got away with, or was suspected of, but the authorities didn't have enough proof to wrap him up.
When did you? So Gary Stewart is on with us. The Most Dangerous Animal of All is this book, Searching for My Father and Finding the Zodiac Killer. So as you're searching for your biological father, you're not going into this thinking, hey, I'm searching for the Zodiac Killer. At what point does it enter your mind that this guy that you're looking for, your father, could be the Zodiac Killer?
Harold Butler was my mother's friend in Internal Affairs who had given me his name, date of birth, Social Security number. He had also given me what he said was an old DMV photo, driver's license photo. Mm-hmm. I had that. I framed that. If I had known he were a serial killer, would I have framed that and put it by my computer where I work every day? Absolutely not. While I conducted my search, that was there, my inspiration. I have to find this man before he dies and extend forgiveness to him for what he did to me, because after all, his abandoning me was the best thing that he had ever done for me. One day, after being told to just drop it and told that what was in his file was so heinous it would destroy me, I'm watching an A&E Cold Case Files on the special on the Zodiac Killer. The wanted poster from San Francisco, 1969, of the Zodiac Killer pops up on the screen, and I can't breathe. My son hears whatever noise I make, and he runs into the room, and he looks at the television. He says, "Dad, it's you." And I went in my office and got this old DMV photo that I'd been given by the SFPD, which turns out it was his actual mugshot from his rape of my mother in 1962. And I said, "No, Zach, it's not me. It's my father."
And so when you look at those side by side, and you have that in the book, these the mugshot and that sketch artist drawing of the killer, they do look similar. Although I guess I would say back in the 60s, a lot of dudes probably looked like that with the short hair and the glasses and whatnot. But there are other things that you believe point to your father being the Zodiac Killer. So obviously that took your breath away, and you thought, "Oh my God, could my father be the Zodiac Killer?" And then you start trying. Do you start trying to match things up that make sense, or do you start trying to rule him out as the Zodiac Killer?
I start trying to find any bit of evidence that I can to exonerate him, or maybe have him not in the right place at the right time, and so forth. And every single stone I overturn, just, which is why I started documenting my research and why I started chronicling my journey, which eventually became my book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Every step along the way was so surprising and unbelievable. If I had not lived it myself, I wouldn't believe it.
Now, what else? What other evidence or tangible evidence points to, besides the Cipher stuff, besides this resemblance in the photo? What else do you have that points to your father being the Zodiac Killer?
There are many things mentioned in the book, but a short list is, of course, the mugshot and the wanted sketch. The Paul Avery connection. When in 1961, 1962, when you're 27 and you're running off with a 14-year-old and the cops catch you and you just happen to meet in an ice cream parlor, good journalists are going to say something like, "He found love in an ice cream parlor. Ice cream romance is bitter end." The problem was he was 27 and his young bride was only 14. I found out through contacting the Chronicle and archivist at the San Francisco Library that Paul Avery was the author of The Ice Cream Romance. The Zodiac Killer came back and targeted Paul Avery as part of his taunting the media. Paul Avery specifically. Nobody knew that connection. My father's names in the Cipher, the Rotea connection, the Atascadero connection, the fact that some Zodiac letters were written on teletype paper, the same kind of paper that was immediately available to my father because his stepfather was a clerk for the S&P Railroad. One thing after another.
Whatever happened with the DNA evidence? I mean, did they thought that they had a partial DNA profile of the Zodiac Killer? They took a DNA profile of you. Did they try to match those up?
I honestly believe what happened is when I told my mother that I had not listened to Butler and Sanders' advice and gone around them and went to Lieutenant Hennessy and showed her that Hennessy had swabbed me to compare my DNA with what they had on file with the Zodiac Killer. I believe that's when everything got tipped off. I can't be certain, but Lieutenant Hennessy, I saw the emotion in his eyes when I told him the sincerity of my story, and that man committed to me. He said, "Gary, I give you my word. I will do this for you to give you closure one way or another. You and your family deserve that."
Why would the police not want to solve it? That's what I guess I'm having a hard time figuring out. So you have one guy that is looking to help you, and other guys that are giving you the runaround. Why? Yep. Why would they? This is a very famous case. Why wouldn't they want to close this? hold a press conference and say, you know what? We have handwriting analysis that says it was this guy from the ciphers. We have partial fingerprint, DNA, blah, blah, blah. Why wouldn't they want to close this famous case?
My mother believes that it's because of her late husband's involvement in the Zodiac case. You know, there are allegedly 2,500 suspects in the Zodiac case.
Mm-hmm.
If my father happened to be interviewed and cleared because he was a very intelligent, smooth-talking salesman and was cleared, maybe even by Rotea Guilford, I'm just speculating. How would that look? And she says she thinks Harold Butler and Earl Sanders were keeping the truth from me, not in order to protect me and my mother, but protect the reputation of Rotea Guilford because he was such a great man. I don't know, but what I can tell you is my mother's position of uninvolvement has changed overnight, and she is now saying, honey, I wish I would have marched into Hennessy's office with you arm in arm, saying, I don't care what Butler says, I don't care what Sanders says, I want to know the truth. And why don't they do the DNA?
Well, this book, I want to read the rest of this book and find out all of the details. It's called The Most Dangerous Animal of All, Searching for My Father and Finding the Zodiac Killer. It's available in stores now. It at least gives an alternate suspect, I suppose. And people can read this. They can read other competing theories and draw their own conclusions. What's the next step? Now that you have this book out, where do you see this going in the future, Gary?
You know, I've been asked that question so many times over the past 2 weeks, and today I have an answer. I continually get asked, so why don't you reach out to the SFPD? You know, when the book first came out, the new people at the SFPD had no idea that Lieutenant Hennessy had swabbed me 10 years ago. So that's coming forward. Now with my book coming out, that's coming forward. But the immediate question, when are you going to contact the SFPD? I don't think I have to. My mother just did that for me. She went to Inspector Gianrico Perucci, who promised to follow up on her request, and she wants to know why did they destroy Gary's father's file.
Well, this will be interesting. It would certainly be a great story if this guy's searching for his father as a, sort of an amateur sleuth and solves this very, very famous crime. Multiple movies have been made about this, books written about this, countless books, newspaper articles, a very famous case, the Zodiac Killer. Gary, I appreciate you coming on. Good luck with the book. And I guess maybe we'll follow up at some point in the future. It could be months from now, years from now. But maybe there'll be some sort of follow-up, and maybe we'll talk to you again sometime, Gary.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Good luck. Thank you. Gary Stewart.